Welcome to the second day of the 24th Congress for the Viktor Frankl Institute. I hope everyone was able to get some rest, some self-care. I know the different time schedules can be somewhat taxing, so welcome again. I think I say this first part almost as a warning. As one of the oldsters, as Dr. Hutzel and Vicki have described, some of us who've been around for a number of years, I found that when I go to the Congress, whether here in Europe, wherever there are logotherapists speaking, there are things that resound immediately with me. They fit my frame of reference. I can file them, and things seem very settled. However, one of the most important things through the years, I found that there are many that have to marinate. They have to soak in, if you will, and settle. And maybe 6 months or 9 months or a year later, they begin to bubble back to the top. I think that's part of the genius of Dr. Frankl's work. Logotherapy some ways can be described in very simple terms, but in other ways, it's very complex in its simplicity. So I would encourage you to allow it to settle and to listen these that have been practicing for a number of years, and to honor their wisdom and take their lessons with gratitude. At least that's been the formula I found through the years. That have been very meaningful for me as I go to these congresses. But before we move into our first session, there are a couple of things I want to update you on. 2 years ago, after the Congress, we started our logo chats. These are held every other month. There is no cost to these. The next one will be December the 2nd. That is a Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Time, with Dr. Michael Winters hosting. His topic, which I find very intriguing, will be logotherapy and psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. So for anyone who is interested, you do need to register. Again, there is no charge, but without registering, we're unable to send you the link. So that is December the 2nd. After this Congress, one of the things we are working to do is to provide opportunities for additional specialized training in logotherapy beyond our traditional classes and certifications. Our first workshop will be held by Marianne Prado, the founder of Logo Art. The specific date and cost of the workshop is still to be determined, but we're anticipating it will happen very soon after the first of the year, so after the holidays. We will be sending out emails, especially for you that have attended the Congress, announcing this, and the workshops will provide CE credit for those who are needing it. I also want to highlight that Dr. Hutzel's workbook, a workbook to increase your meaningful and purposeful goals, is now available both on our website, but also on the Congress website. So if you haven't had a chance to visit the page this morning, it is available for download there off of the Congress website. And the last announcement I need to make, the 4 o'clock session, Self-Nudge Strategies for Decision-Making and Self-Distancing in Cases of Binge Eating, has had to be canceled. The presenter has had a conflict in her schedule and some things came up, so she will not be able to be there this afternoon. I wanted to give you a heads up to be able to pick one of the other sessions. And now finally, I would like to welcome you to the session. Alex, I'm so excited. I haven't had a chance to visit with you in a while. It's been a long time since we were in the stockyards many years ago. So if you have not had the opportunity to hear some of Alex's memories with his grandfather and with logotherapy, it's a wonderful opportunity. And leading the session, if you will, with the interviews, Bob and Vicki, Dr. Robert Hutzel and his wife Vicki, they are a team that has been involved with logotherapy for a number of years. They very much hold much of the history of the Institute, and their friendship with the Frankls and the family through the years has provided the rest of us with a lot of information and a lot of ways to understand more about the life and the story of Dr. Frankl. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob and allow him to provide us insight, if you will, into, I think it was the rest of the story used to be the tag. So Bob and Vicki, welcome. Alex, welcome from Vienna. And I'll leave it with y'all.
Thank you, Cindy, and good morning or whatever time of day it is for people listening. Here in Iowa in the United States, it's a little after 9 o'clock in the morning. Alex, what time is it for you?
Good morning. Good morning. It's a little after 4 p.m.
4 in the afternoon in Vienna?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Vicki has a bit of an introduction here that she's going to tell us to get us started.
Welcome, Alex. Alexander Vesely, MA, grandson of Viktor Frankl, is a producer and award-winning documentary film director working with the production company of Straight Up Films in Los Angeles, California. He is also a licensed logotherapist and logotherapy trainer working with Elizabeth Lukas Archive in Germany. He runs the Viktor Frankl Media Archives in Vienna. Alexander began in TV and film production and co-founded the production company Clipwork. His interest in psychology and cinema led him to become a licensed psychotherapist. He has tutored at the University of Vienna and guest lectured at the University of Television and Film in Munich, Germany. He travels the world speaking on logotherapy. He also worked with renowned playwright Christian Mukunda at Comment Production Group over 5 years before continuing his work with Noetic Films and Straight Up Entertainment in Los Angeles, California. In 2020, he co-founded the Viktor Frankl Institute of America. This year, he started an online academy for logotherapy with Heidi Schoenfeld and Elizabeth Lukas. Alex was born in 1974 in Vienna, Austria. He has one older sister, Katerina. Alex's talent with film was noted at an early age, and some of his earliest video footage was taken of his grandfather, who bought Alex his first video camera. Many of us have seen his documentary, Viktor and I, which won several awards. He has now directed many short films, commercials, and documentaries. He has also traveled the world speaking on logotherapy. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Cynthia, for the invitation. It's good to be back. And I just noticed, Bob and Vicki, I think it was exactly 30 years ago that we first met at the conference in Toronto, 1993.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that well. You're 2 years older than our oldest daughter, Daisy.
Uh-huh. Yeah, Daisy, I remember her.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
A group of you wanted to go out to a movie and ice cream, and we were concerned because our Daisy was, and Julie is 2 years younger than her, and they wanted to go out with these older kids. And we were hesitant, and you came to us and you said it would be all right. You would watch out for them. So I particularly remember that time.
Oh,
And
that's funny.
then there was a group that went out, and Arlen Salthouse was the older person that ended up going out with that group. So yeah, fond memories,
Yeah.
particularly of you taking the responsibility to say, I'm going to watch out for them. They'll be all right. So they can go with us and have ice cream and go to whatever else you went to.
Well,
And
your
they
memory is
wonderful
much better
time.
than mine.
It was the hit of their trip.
What do you remember? What movie we watched? Now I'd be impressed if you remember that too.
I do
I
not.
don't.
I do not.
Yeah.
Well, let's start out. We'll get to some interview things about you, but people are going to also want to know, how are things going with your grandmother and your family and so on. So let's give them a little information about that, and then we'll have some other questions that are more directly related to you.
Yeah. The family's doing okay. My grandmother this summer moved to a retirement home. She is 97 years old now, and well, she's feeling her age, but so sometimes she'll repeat a question several times, but her observation is still very sharp. The last time I visited her, she was like, "Alex, you got new shoes, right?" So, and she will tell you stories from the 40s and 50s that you never heard before. So oftentimes I'll tell her, "Okay, could you hold on for a second? I want to record this," and then comes some story that I've never heard before. So yeah, things are good, and we're very, very grateful that she's doing so well given her age.
Excellent. Well, let's start out going back to those very early years before you knew that your grandfather was anything more than grandpa. What was that like back then? You know, there's family, there's holidays. Your sister's 2 years older than you.
4 years. Mm-hmm.
4 years, okay. So what was that like growing up back then?
Well, you say when he was still a grandfather. To me, he still first and foremost is a grandfather. So that it hasn't changed. But what has changed, of course, was when I realized that a lot of people were affected in a positive way by the things that he had to say and by his teachings. And at first, well, I was surprised when I read Man's Search for Meaning. On the way to that conference we were talking about, that's how not interested I was in what Grandpa was doing. And so I was surprised, because I thought, how can this be the same person that I know, that is so funny, that is so curious about life and what's happening in the moment, and able to enjoy the smallest things, and how can there be that person that has had such a tremendous suffering that he had to undergo. And then I realized that was because of that attitude that he had, and his inner resources that he could cultivate, and the ability to take a step aside from himself and his own situation. I mean, all the things that logotherapy is really about, he didn't just talk about them, but he lived them, and you could see how that is humanly possible, and he was the best example of doing that. So he was funny. He was a person that when you were in his presence, you would always walk away a little smarter or feeling better, because he would say something funny or tell you something that was tell you a joke, and you would all laugh. So you would feel you would benefit in some way from him. You never went away empty or feeling that you didn't do enough, or the kinds of feelings that sometimes you have when you're around certain people. So it was always a delight. And even if he told jokes, and if you remember him, he was a jokester. He repeated those jokes that he had heard. He always said, "I don't remember a joke, so I have to tell it for weeks. I'll tell the same joke, and then it's in my repertoire." So he would repeat them, and sometimes, we'd heard them 100 times, so they were not really that funny anymore. But his reaction, the way he tickled himself, was so funny that you'd laugh about that. So it was just always this, a sense of lightness, and how good life is, and how sometimes bizarre, but that's again something you can look at from a humorous angle.
Now, did you live close by
Yes.
the Frankl grandparents, or?
Yes. So, well, if you ever come to Vienna, it's a small city, so it's hard not to live close to anybody. Oftentimes, my mom would pick up my sister and me from school, and then we would drive downtown, get something to eat, and then hang out at their flat in Marianengasse #1. And sometimes we would have sleepovers there, and yeah, so we were pretty close family, which now I see as something that also was something that wasn't, it could have been different, and I'm grateful that we had so much contact.
What about your Vesely grandparents? Were they there in the same city?
No, they lived a little bit outside, also not too far, a half an hour drive west of Vienna. And well, they died early. So I was in my teens when both of them passed away. But vivid memories of them too that I cherish. Yes.
Good. What about the holidays? Given a couple of religions involved, how did you all handle the holidays?
Mm-hmm. Well, because we were so close anyway, without any kind of external reason to get together, there was never a whole lot of focus or pressure of, okay, it's this and that holiday, and everyone has to attend or travel to be here. To this day, in my family, that's held very loosely. So we get together all the time for no reasons. And then if there's a holiday, say Hanukkah, which we're celebrating as long as Viktor was still around, we would meet in Marianengasse, and he would read and do the celebration, which at a very early age, of course, I was a child, so I didn't quite understand what was going on. And so one of the things that is still being quoted in the family is me after a celebration together saying, okay, what are we going to play next? But that's, I mean, you see how this came from this. Viktor enjoyed that, right? And we enjoyed that too. He would, I don't speak Hebrew, right? So he would do that. And but it was just a natural, this is what we do, and this is it's a good reason to celebrate that we're here. And yeah, that's how it felt to me. It felt to me, had that positive association of, okay, this is a game we're playing.
And that fits with the acceptance that your grandfather had, and this being willing to accept things, this and this and this, rather than saying, I have this way that I'm going to do it and you need to do it my way, which is so common, at least in the United States today, is people want you to do it their way and not so.
I think that's common everywhere. You'll hear that too. Yeah, I think that whenever I'm asked what did you learn from him, or what was the most important kind of life lesson I say that was it, that he completely respected and had faith in your ability as a human being to figure things out, and that you actually needed to figure things out, and that whatever he would give you in the role of a grandfather or as a therapist with his patients, that wouldn't be ideal. That you should never be think that you have to give meaning. So like the first rule in logotherapy, don't give anything, don't give any ready-made answers, but trust the process, trust the patient, trust the individual that you're talking to, whoever that is, whatever the setting is, that they are fully capable and equipped, even as children, even in that stage, to find their way, to do things, to find their role models too. So in that way, he influenced me the most, being a role model, and he could show, you can do your own thing, you can do what you think is right. You don't impose on others, and if you do what you think is right, people will eventually notice it, and then it's their decision to do with that whatever they think is meaningful to do with it.
And that fits so well with a therapeutic relationship, because we all learn that if we tell somebody what to think, or if we tell them what to do, they might do it a little bit, they may try it, but they'll lose it. But if you help them to figure it out themselves, then that's a part of them and they will stick with it. So even in just his regular relationships, I think Frankl did that, and I think that's my interpretation of what you're saying there. Is
Absolutely, exactly, yes,
got to be a part of you.
exactly.
He gave you your first video camera?
Well, there's a story. um, so yeah, Victor was, he didn't give meaning in the sense of imposing it, but he was a person who he liked to give, and he liked to give when there were material needs that could be covered. He would be the first to do that, and so I think that's something a lot of grandparents do. They like to spoil their grandkids a little. And so we had this this silent rule: you don't utter any wishes that could be fulfilled, bought, in front of neither grandpa nor grandma, because they would pick up on that. And so don't do that. And I remember the day when we were at a restaurant and my grandmother was there, and it was the time when video cameras were becoming affordable. And I was into film early on. I was fascinated by the medium. And at the time, I was working with with an 8mm film camera. You remember those? They were fun. I mean, they were great, but you were very limited. And so I consciously broke the rule, and I said to my dad, it would be great to have one of those video cameras. Imagine what you can do. You can record and re-record, and you can record with sound. Isn't that amazing? And he was giving me the look. And sure enough, the next weekend, the call came. And it was my grandfather. He said, "Well, I've heard that you need a video camera." I said, "Well, I don't need one, but it would be nice." And so that was that one time I consciously broke that rule, and to this day I don't regret it.
Yes. And you benefited, and we all benefited from your breaking that particular rule. What did you film?
Everything. I'm it's good. When I applied, when I was 19, I applied at film schools, and none of them took me. I later taught at one film school that hadn't accepted me as a student. But it goes to show you, if you're really interested in something, you do it, and you find ways to teach yourself. And that camera allowed me to just practice my skills and experiment. And because it was video, you could really experiment, because it's no harm if you recorded an hour of a corner of the wall. You could just erase it. And so that was the best tool to practice and to get a feel for how to work with the camera. And I could have done that for a lot of money at a film school, but you can also learn these things by just observing and doing it and finding out what works and what doesn't.
Do you still have any of those old videos, and do you incorporate those into your current work at all?
You know, actually just last month, I came across a recording I'd forgotten about. So yeah, it's nice when you have a little bit of chaos because you find things that you didn't even know that you lost them.
Well, here's a question that was sent in from the audience.
First one.
Yep.
What is your favorite memory of your grandfather?
Oh, well, that's a tough one because there are many. So it would depend on the situation. And sometimes I remember, excuse me. Well, that camera, that was a good one. But almost every memory I have is one that was good. I specifically remember one where I was in had a moment of angst, right? And I was a little child, and I was thinking about death and all these things, and my parents couldn't talk me out of it. And so I remember I think it was my dad who said, "Let's call Viktor." And his phone was always open to anybody. He insisted that his number was in the phone book and people could call him night or day, and they did. And so my dad called him and he said, "Can you talk to Alex?" And I remember him explaining to me how an airplane, and you see, he was a pilot. He could learn how to fly an airplane. And he explained to me how sometimes, you don't see the sun and everything looks gray, but then you fly up through the clouds and then there's the sun. The sun was never gone. And you just don't see it. And so it was the metaphor for, okay, you might feel this way now and everything's gray, but that doesn't mean that the sun is gone. You just don't see it right now. So that was, he didn't even need to say that, but I knew what he was trying to tell me. And to this day, I remember how that really helped me. It was like, okay, it's a state I'm in, and I see reality from a certain perspective, but there's more to reality. And yeah, that was a successful intervention.
Yes. And that was one of the things that he was so good at, was providing these metaphors that people could understand without having to have it explained to you. Yes. So we get back to that idea of you figuring it out, you getting it, because it's clear, but it's you that figures out what is so clear that he just told you.
Yes. And it doesn't devalue your own point of view. He didn't say there are no clouds. So it's that, that it was confirming, okay, what you perceive is there, but there's also another way to look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you mentioned his flying. One of the questions, we'll have another of the questions that came in that are related to that.
Okay, the question is, what type of leisure might Frankl engage in everyday life? Not a trip to the mountains, for example. Did he listen to music on a somewhat regular basis, or play chess, or play the guitar, etc.? What else did he do in his free time?
In the little free time that he had, sometimes he would take us to the Prater, what's the name for it? The amusement park. The old amusement park, which is close to where he had grown up. And a lot of logotherapy was developed in the shadow of the giant Ferris wheel. And the fact that he would observe how a lot of people went there to kind of escape their own lives and to not feel the existential vacuum that they were dealing with, and find pleasure in chase moments of pleasure. But then, of course, everything has multiple sides. So there is a time for just enjoying and having fun and eating cotton candy. And so sometimes he would say, let's go to the Prater. And he would just have as much fun as we had. He was a big child inside, and he never lost that. So it was fun to see him having fun. Well, when he wasn't climbing, well, it was the people. I mean, it was a family man. He enjoyed just being around with us and talking with us, talking with my dad, who is a physicist. I mean, he originally has nothing to do with psychology or psychotherapy. He's retired now, but he's a great physicist who was also teaching, so he could explain very well things like quantum physics. And Viktor was interested in a lot of things that had nothing to do with psychotherapy. So he enjoyed having these conversations with my dad about what's going on in the world of physics. Always learning, always interested in understanding more about the world. So those were the things. And then playing chess or playing the guitar or just goofing around. I mean, he could imitate people very well, which is something he had a bit of a talent for that, and so did I. So sometimes we would have competitions and just imitate people, things like that.
And he could do that on paper also in his caricatures that
Exactly.
to
Exactly.
draw people. So
Yeah,
it's spread across several domains in that ability to see the essence and then project it back out.
And the artistic streak, which I think to some extent really ran in the family. His brother was an interior designer, and there were magazines printed in 1930s where actually you'd see his design. So he was his brothers, Walter. So these talents, music. Viktor said he always had a tune in his ear. He taught himself how to play the piano, and he composed a tango, which you might have seen if you have seen my film. So there are hundreds of interests. It was really never boring. He didn't sit around and figure out ways to kill time. There was just too much to learn and too much to do. And I think this curiosity is something was defining for his personality.
I found it interesting that you were telling about him telling the jokes and so on. Joe Fabry used to tell us about when he was young, one of his best friends was related to Sigmund Freud, and they would go there for Sunday lunches, and Joe Fabry would say that he didn't know Sigmund Freud as anything other than the best joke teller that he knew when he was a small child, because he would come in and tell these jokes while they were there at dinner.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
So from what we're talking about here, you mentioned your father and that he was a physicist, but he's also become involved in logotherapy. And doesn't he run the Vienna website? At least whenever I've had an interaction with the website, it's been through Franz Vesely rather than someone else.
Yes, and not just that, he's actually done and continues to do for decades now the Frankl archives. So all the paperwork that my grandfather left behind, and he just threw them into some maps and into a room, and he's going through those and organizing them and digitally making them accessible. So that's an ongoing work. So he's got a lot on his plate, and that's replaced the physics. Now it used to be both, and now it's only that, and he's still has his work cut out for him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Tell us more about the Vienna Institute and the website. I think a lot of people know about it, but maybe there's some people that don't know that much about it yet.
Yeah, well, it's really a resource for anybody who's interested in logotherapy and knowing what literature exists, what books have recently appeared, and what books are there in what language. Not all books are translated into English even at this point, but they're getting more and more. So you can see what books exist. You can see what institute exists, what kind of trainings exist in the world, and it's always updated so that it's more or less on the status, the latest status. So it's a good resource to go in there. So that's what the institute does, which is available to everybody. And the website exists in 2 pages, in German and in English. And so whatever information, even if you know little to nothing about logotherapy, you just go there and read an abstract about what are the basics of logotherapy, or the biography of Viktor Frankl, which turns out is a very well documented life, and new documents just keep popping up in all kinds of places documenting what he did when, and that's interesting too. So the biography becomes more detailed, and has become more detailed over the years, and continues to do so.
And you play a role there in part of the archives, the video part. Tell us about that.
Video and audio, yes. That was in the beginnings of the Institute. Actually, originally that idea didn't even have anything to do with the Institute, but it became part of that. So my grandfather, I mentioned the room where he puts everything in, and he had the habit of carrying a tape recorder with him from the 1970s on to record his own lectures, not because he liked to hear himself talk, but because he knew that oftentimes he would say something in the spur of the moment, and then not be able to reconstruct that or retell that, or recall what exactly he said. And so this was like a notebook. And he was also interested in making sure that there was as little possibilities of distorting the things that he said, because he had witnessed that often happens when people just reconstruct something based on notes or stenography, and then some article would appear where a lot of things were in there that were wrong. And with logotherapy, it's very important to be precise in the language, because it's very easy that you say something that's half off, and that's almost worse than saying something that's completely off, right? And so he didn't like that, and I think that was another reason why he taped so many of his recordings. And so there are many tapes, and I saw them collecting dust, and I knew enough about tapes that I knew they were not getting any better, just being sitting around on the table. And so I asked him, would you mind if I take this list where, they had numbers, and there was a list that Ellie, my grandmother, had typed of which number corresponds to which tape and what's on it. So most tapes don't have any writing on it other than just a number. And they were starting to come off because the glue was getting old. And so I knew soon you'd have, if the tapes were not destroyed, you would have no idea what's on them, because the labels were coming off. And so I asked him if he would allow me to take that list and at least make a copy of the list to gather kind of an overview of what's there and what might be important to save. And he said, no, absolutely not. I don't want you to touch that list. So he had no trust in me, not losing it, or I don't know, because without that list, good luck, ever reconstructing what recording is what. And so again, I broke the law. And this was before iPhones or scanners. I just went to a nearby copy shop and made a copy and brought it back, and he hadn't noticed it. And it's another thing I don't regret, because I think it was good to have that copy of that list. And then I started making copies of these analog tapes. Analog is great because over the decades you might hear a little more hiss, but the information is there. It's not like it's lost. So it took me about 25 years to get everything digitized, and to build that archive. Audio was still relatively simple, but then with video, anybody who knows the early days of videos, there were a ton of different formats. And of course, machines are hard to find that will still play those tapes. And if they do, they might be recorded in a different standard, American standard. And then, you see nothing. You have to find that machine, but in another country. And I have to say, it was actually, it was a challenge that I enjoyed. And looking back on it, yeah, I'm a little proud that I pulled it off.
Now, are those available to people? They have to come there, or can you access them through the internet, or tell us about that?
Yes. Well, some of them are available. If you go on YouTube, a lot of the material that you see actually came from that, from those tapes that I copied. And then some tapes actually I put online, and then years later, the TV station that had made that interview put their version online, which of course is better quality. So it kind of might have influenced the fact that there's no more of original Frankls available for free, which is what he would have wanted. And some of the recordings are available through a publisher in Germany. Those would be German. They're available for research. A lot of times people will go, okay, I want to know what he said on this or that topic, and then I give them a tape. But there's no general way that they're accessible now. That's going to be a next step, and I'm looking forward to that. I think that has become easier now with all the advances in artificial intelligence, to even just go through a recording and maybe find out what he says in that recording. So that's the next step in the process. But for now, it's all saved and survived, because some of the tapes, especially the videotapes, they deteriorate very quickly, and it's all safe now and stored.
And we appreciate the effort that you went into to do that for us.
Thanks.
Well, we're getting more questions from the audience, so maybe we'll see if Vicky can read these. Can you see that? Can you see them, Alex, on your end?
I can see them, yes. You want me to just go from the top?
Let's just go ahead and pick up on some of those, because people have these questions, and we have lots of questions, but let's go with theirs for a while.
Okay, I see one. Do you think there might be another film to capture your grandfather from my growing up perspective? Yes. I think that I might do some more. If you've seen Viktor and I, that was really had started kind of as an archive project in part, recording all these people that had known him and that had worked with him. And I've since made as many recordings, interviews as I had done at the time the film came out. So, and there's wonderful stories. I did an interview with his flight instructor. It's very hard to find. He lives in Alaska, and half of the time he is not even in a place where you have cell phone reception. So, and about my perspective from growing up, I haven't put myself so much in the spotlight. If you've noticed, Viktor and I, the eyes does not stand for me. But of course, since I pick the stories that are in the film, it is sort of my perspective as well. And I might one day do, I don't know, maybe we can use this interview that we're doing right now and put that into the film. So there might be more coming. Is there a rule or tradition that I consider important for life? Well, I think I think I answered that already by there's no fixed rule that's kind of set in stone. I mean, not that that wouldn't be okay, but it's no. The the rule is we trust you, and I think that helped me trust myself. Personally, how do you like us to remember your grandfather? Collectively, from your perspective, what is your grandfather's legacy and hope for the future? This is funny. One of the things that he always said was, I don't consider myself a genius, but I just think things to the end logically. And I remember one day he said, Alex, do you know this saying, you're not dead as long as somebody remembers you? I said, yeah, I've heard that. And I like it. And he said, well, but think about it. If I die tomorrow, so you're going to remember me for another, I don't know, 80 years. And then you're dead. And then I'll be dead because nobody remembers me anymore. Right. So what can I, how does that help me deal with death? You know, if it's about that, to be remembered, the day will come where you're not being remembered, or where there were no people who remember you directly. Of course, in part, the work that I do with the archives is exactly to prevent that people won't remember him or be able to learn from the source what he had to say. But he didn't make it about himself, and I think there's enough value to logotherapy and to his teachings and to his ideas that he just sought for that to be preserved by publishing, by putting all his knowledge into his books, and so that he knew that in 1,000 years people can pull up some book and be reminded not perhaps so much of him, but of the things that he had to say, and that people can benefit from that. So he wouldn't make it about his person. We're making it about his person because we like him, and he happened to be an interesting person. But it's not really necessary for logotherapy. It works without him. And of course, he had his style of doing therapy. And say his student Elizabeth Lucas has a very different style, and her student Heidi Schoenfeld has yet a different style, and yet it works, which again shows you that you know, there's a lot of substance and a lot of things that you can do with logotherapy, and it's actually open enough and allows for you to bring in your own style and to use it your way. Because again, to quote my grandfather, every psychotherapeutic method is only as good as the person that's applying it.
When I first read about logotherapy, I was working with Jim Crumbaugh in Gulfport, Mississippi. And what struck me was that he said it Frankl said it in a little different way, but it just made sense. And then in reading him and communicating, he indicated that same idea, is that, you know, all I'm doing is taking these universal truths and making sense out of them. And then I heard him on at least 2 occasions say something like, if what I did does make sense, if it's somehow taps into reality, I'm using my words and not his, then other people are going to figure this out too. They're going to figure it out in their own way, in their own time, in their own language. So I've heard people say, well, so-and-so is stealing whatever from logotherapy. And I'm not quick to pick up on that, because I'm thinking, no, that just fits with what Viktor Frankl said, is that other people from a totally different perspective, if there's truth here, they're going to figure it out also, but they're not going to say it the same way.
Right. Exactly. And you don't, and a lot of people will never need a logotherapist and live perfectly good lives and meaningful lives and happy lives. He put these ideas that were always there. You find them in, the old scriptures and in philosophy. And he saw that they were not implemented in psychology and in psychotherapy. And so he just placed it there, and he learned from his patients, and he learned from, we say the simple man from the street, or now you have to say man or woman. You can't say simple, and he didn't mean it in a devaluing way, but on the contrary, right? He was looking up to the people who had this common sense is too simple a word. He called it to make it complicated, the pre-reflexive ontological self-understanding. Right. So that knowing what's of value, that knowing what's right and what's wrong, and what's meaningful and what isn't, and that what's meaningful is actually that what matters, that and not just this always reflect on yourself, and all these things. We've basically been brainwashed to think about the human condition by what's communicated through the media and through decades of the predominating forms of psychotherapy. And logotherapy is counter to that, but it's not counter to human nature. And I think that's exactly the reason why a lot of people always found it. It never was in fashion, he would say, so it will never be out of fashion. And that's kind of the beauty of it. It becomes rediscovered time and again.
Yeah. And I think it's right that it never was like in fashion, so it can't go out of fashion. But at some level, people have, since he wrote these things, understood, and they have picked up on it, and it has become a part of their lives.
Yes.
Now I have an app on my computer that picks up newspaper or video comments about Frankl. Every day I'm getting these reports from, I can only read English, so they're only the English ones, but every day, still today, you get these reports. The most recent one I had just the other day was Arnold Schwarzenegger talking about how Viktor Frankl influenced his life.
Huh.
And many times I've heard Anderson Cooper, who's another American broadcaster, talk about his how he keeps a copy of Man's Search for Meaning in his office. And there are other people that, some of these are people I've not heard of, but a lot of these people that are still commenting on this are people that we know and see on television nightly, that continue to talk about the influence that Man's Search for Meaning and Viktor Frankl has had on their lives. So in some sense, you can't call it the current buzzword, but you can say that there is a sense of currency to it, even all these years later. It amazes me each day when I open up that file that says what was in the news today that mentioned logotherapy or Viktor Frankl. And there's always things like that.
Well, I think it just shows you that what he tried to get at and what he wrote about was certain timeless truths, and not just some fashion or some thing that's lasts for a year and then it's gone and replaced by the next. He had this ability, and as you said, I mean, it wasn't something that he invented from scratch. He might have invented some of the terminology that he gave it and made it, translated it into language that was useful at the time. Mostly doctors. I mean, it wasn't even psychotherapy; it was part of the medical profession. And but it's timeless, and I think of that every time I listen to one of those recordings, or I find one and I digitize them, and he's speaking. If you go online, for example, you see that speech that he held at the Vienna City Hall in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the annexation of Austria into Nazi Germany, and he said some words about collective guilt, and he said some words about his experiences and about the dangers of that collective thinking and judging people by associations. And every sentence is timeless and timely. and he could hold that speech today, and he wouldn't have to change a single word, and it would still, be that powerful, just because he had this ability to see a truth and to explain it in words that everybody would understand.
Exactly. And I think part of his humility comes across, and that he made that clear whenever you would listen to him or talk with him. He would say that, folks, I'm just telling you what other people have already told you. I'm saying it in a way maybe you can understand better. I'm organizing it, but these are universal truths that I haven't made up myself. These are things that people have talked about for the ages.
Yeah,
And always express that.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we have some more audience questions coming up here.
What's my own perspective on finding meaning? Well, yeah, I mean, that's like every other human being. It doesn't make it easier. If you're related to Viktor Frankl, I can tell you that. You have to find your own. I mean, that, for example, that archive, the fact that this is preserved now, and the fact that it will be around for people to access. That's something that I had the opportunity to do this because I was there in that right time in the right place, so to speak. I had the interest, maybe even developed a technical talent for that, and it was meaningful. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and that is now finished and in a different phase, that's the process of finding out what is meaningful, what choices do I make. I did the documentary. I'm involved in a couple of projects that have to do with meaning and film as well. So it's probably going to have something to do with film or video, because that's just a medium that I love. I love. So yeah, but I'm not completely sure what it's going to be either.
Can you tell us more about those projects so that we can anticipate them?
Yes, sure. So there's one project that's a series of short films. The working title is Meaning in the Madness, and it's trying to show what's going on, especially in America. So this is with straight up films, in terms of problems that are systemic and that could be better, and where the question of meaning comes in. Really, we know that it's always there and it always helps, but where it becomes specifically important to look at things from that perspective. And that's one episode is about school, and what we have done is to interview the persons that are in that situation and that actually are in the process of or have found a way out, and naturally that has to do with finding meaning. So this first episode was about school and the competitiveness of a girl who's in a very good school, and yet she found herself being suicidal. And it was because there was just meaningless competition. You have to be number one, a lot of pressure, but why? And she found a way out of that. And the second episode is about drug overprescription, like psychopharmaceutic overprescription. And I don't have to tell you that there is an epidemic, not just in the US, but there is a tendency to overprescribe and to put young people on medication who really are who would not need medication, but it's an existential vacuum, or in the process of finding and asking actually very good and healthy questions, and but they receive tranquilizers and antidepressants instead, because that's the quick fix and the supposedly easy fix. Now we know that the side effects are that after a while they will feel nothing anymore. So it's not really a solution that's in the long term helping. And we're trying to raise awareness for these issues. The other project is a film that's already been in discussion for a longer period of time, which is a biopic, a film on Viktor, and his life. Not a documentary, but a feature film, which is incredibly difficult to make. I didn't think it was so difficult, but you know, but that might be a good thing. So we're not making any compromises there. Yes, so that maybe answers the question of what I would like to make a movie about. The role of Ellie, well, every book you read on by Viktor Frankl was really written by Ellie Frankl, and that she would type it, or she would in the beginnings even take notes from him, and she can do stenography, and she would do that. There were no tape recorders in the very beginning, and oftentimes when Viktor was formulating something very in a very complex manner, she would throw down the pencil and tell him, Viktor, I'm not going to write that because nobody's going to understand it. And he took her protest and her rejection, and saw that when he saw that she had a point, and he would reformulate it so it would be easy to understand. So you can thank her not just for the books on logotherapy that exist, but also for the fact that they are somewhat understandable, some more than others. And that was all her decision to make that sacrifice. She never had a plan to type or to be kind of in the secretary role of a typist, of a secretary, personal secretary. She always tells a story of how she knew that there were two things that she never wanted to do in her life, and one was be a secretary, and the other was to marry a doctor. And so, but then she'll continue telling, why that was the case. And she said she was working so much with doctors, and she was close to doctors. She was essentially a nurse in the dental department of the polyclinic, and here she was, this 19-year-old, and the doctors didn't take her very seriously, so they would talk openly in her presence. And she said, she always tells us that, Alex, they were all talking about money, and that's it. And so she really didn't like that, and she thought, is there nothing else that is the reason why they're doctors? And what a difference that was when she met Viktor, and she learned, okay, not every doctor is just interested in money or prestige. And so yeah, and then she saw the value of what he was writing or what he was talking about, and decided to be a part of that, and sacrificed a lot of their time and her own maybe expectations that she had in her life, but she did that very consciously, and I've never heard her regret it. On the contrary. Interview on Australian TV from the 70s. Huh. Oh, yeah, I would like to see that. So there's an interview on Australian TV from the 70s. No, I don't think that's in the archives. So yeah, but it might, there are a lot of things are lying around in TV stations archives, and that would be interesting to have. Perhaps, you could write them, and maybe they'll give you a copy. And if they do, please remember me. I would love to have a copy of any of those, any things that are out there and that you might find. The difference between self-transcendence and self-actualization. What did he mean by that? Well, that's logotherapy. Well, it's pretty simple. Self-transcendence, my grandfather defined as that state which is the healthiest, most natural and original and primary state that a human being is, that we're essentially born with, which is the fact that we are always oriented beyond ourselves, onto the world, onto other people, onto things that are not yet again ourselves. And only when we're neurotic or indoctrinated by psychologists to just change that and to observe more about ourselves and to, well, yeah, nothing's bad about self-reflection, but you can overdo it. And nowadays it's often overdone, and then it becomes a very bad thing. And this state of self-transcendence, like the eye, you're looking at the world and you're not perceiving anything about yourself. So it doesn't say self-neglect, but overlooking yourself in a healthy way. So that's self-transcendence. It's not something you need to learn. You already do that, and you already did that. And if you look at children, they're usually in a state of self-transcendence. And self-actualization, well, that's a term that actually came not from logotherapy. And that was, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Maslow who introduced that term. Abraham Maslow, perhaps you remember the pyramid of the sort of the hierarchy of needs. My grandfather, Viktor, knew Abraham Maslow, and they actually had a lot of talks about that. They were friendly with each other. But Viktor told him essentially that pyramid is nonsense. And first of all, self-actualization can never be a goal because it is an effect, and it needs to be an effect. The healthy individual is out to fulfill meaningful tasks for the sake of those meaningful tasks themselves. Because something's off or wrong, or a need is not fulfilled in the world, you want to bring yourself in and fix that. You don't do that first and foremost because of yourself. But the effect often is self-actualization, in that the more we actually forget ourselves, the more we transcend ourselves, we become the best versions of ourselves, and we actually actualize ourselves. But it is an effect. Self-actualization is an effect of self-transcending and actualizing meaning in the world.
I once took on the project of asking myself, are there any universal values that Frankl lists or talks about? And after some search, I decided the only value that I can find that he says that comes with every person as a consequence of being born a person was this value for self-transcendence. I couldn't find others that I thought, well, he's saying this is a value everyone has.
Right.
So it was extremely important to him that he talked about self-transcendence and didn't list other things that I could see or find that he said, and everybody else has this thing or that thing. It's the self-transcendence was the primary focus there.
I think it's even more than a value. It goes down to even in the biological something that you can't separate human existence from ever. It's glued together. Being human means being oriented towards the world and overlooking oneself. Only when things go wrong or there's some kind of indoctrination, we start to focus at a lot of this need-based psychology where you're saying, here are the things you need, and you need this and that, and then you can, go out into the world. And he would say, forget all that. It's exactly the other way around. First of all, figure out what you want to do in this world, what you want to change in this world, how you want to resonate into this world. And you can do that. You can do that independently of what has happened to you. And you can fulfill meaning independently of the resources that are available to you. Yeah.
Exactly.
What is next for me? Next chapter in my life? I'm working on this workshop, on this training with the Elizabeth Lucas Archives. It's the online academy for logotherapy. And I too had to learn logotherapy just like everybody else. It was not handed to me genetically or any other way. And so I studied with Elizabeth Lucas, who had opened the first institute in Europe, which was the South German Institute in Munich. And interesting story, when she retired, she handed it over to a former patient who then became a student. and this lady had had an accident and brain damage, and she couldn't do her job anymore, so she came as a patient, and it was so effectively, and she turned her life around, and she became so impressed by what could be done by way of talking about life and finding new goals and looking at what's possible, and not just repeating what thinking about what has been lost, that she became a great therapist, and Lucas would send her patients, and that lady's Heidi Schoenfeld, who then kind of took over the baton of teaching logotherapy. And so since the COVID, that has had to move in part onto digital, just like this conference. And that actually turned out to work really well. And so we got together and decided to make, for the first time, available this original curriculum that Lucas developed. And remember, my grandfather, he was good at coming up with the big design of logotherapy, but he wasn't always too structured in teaching it. And that's really an accomplishment that Lucas, that's all her work to make it teachable, and to bring in examples and to even expand it, although she will never say, and they're talking about humility. You'll find a lot of people who put their own name on anything they come across, and that's fine. But the few people who could really say, I've added something to the toolbox of logotherapy and done so 100% in accordance, and even checking back with my grandfather if he thought so too, and going back and forth and refining things. And Lucas did that, and yet she'll say she added nothing, but she did. And my grandfather didn't work with groups or couples, and she did that. He rarely worked with patients who had addiction problems, and she did that, and she did that systematically, and came up with a lot of ways to do that. And that's what we're going to teach. So it's very tough training, but yeah, very, very good training. So that's what's happening now, and it's going to happen the next 2 years, because it's a lot of work. And as Cynthia mentioned, logotherapy, it's very easy to understand, and you can get the gist of it very quickly, but then it's also a lot of work has gone into it over the decades, and you can go dive in really, really deep and learn more and more. And I keep discovering stuff and learning every day.
So people will be able online to get training through this academy?
Yes.
Okay, but it's not set up yet to do that?
Well, it is. We started this September with the first round and first semester, and it's video lessons. So I'm taking the lessons that are available in German, I'm translating them, and then I'm speaking it into the camera. Even though I like to be behind the camera much more than in front, I'm doing this. And I think my English is good enough for it to be not completely off. It might be a little, might be some Germanisms in there. I apologize for those, or anybody who wants to make that course, but I think overall it's a good training that we put together here.
And if people put into search engine
Logotherapy online,
then that will get them to that. Okay, good. Tell us a little bit about the Viktor Frankl Institute of America. That's different than this online academy, right?
Yes, that's different. Yeah. That's a small scale project that I initiated together with Pam Roy, who's written a book on logotherapy. She is a lady who is into education, and it very intuitively has applied a lot of the ideas that are 100% corresponding with logotherapy intuitively. So that's her big topic. And we started to open this institute to get people to get in contact with logotherapy, hear about it, there's a little video course in there that people can do, which is also interactive, so you can kind of check your own values and meanings and purpose, and get kind of sort of an introduction to logotherapy through this institute.
Excellent. And they can go to the Viktor Frankl Institute of America.
Of America, yeah.
Visit this.
VFIA.
Okay, excellent. So those are additional resources for various audiences, including our audience today.
Yes, so the VFEA, that course is really for everybody. You don't need to be a psychologist or that. The training with the Elizabeth Lucas Archive, it is required that you have some academic background. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult, because we stick very much to the primary literature. And as you know, that's not often an easy read, because my grandfather was initially just writing for colleagues, and they were all, doctors. But even there, we try to break it down and explain what he meant. Okay,
great. Well, I think we've got more questions, a lot more questions.
More questions. Is this isn't everybody yet ready for a coffee break?
Well, I think we go for about 14 more minutes, if I'm correct.
Great.
So we have, let's go with a few more of these questions that people have asked, because it doesn't look like we could possibly get to the end of them.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm scrolling down. Okay. What's my own perspective on finding meaning? Well, they're pretty much the same. I mean, it's a process of discovery, and I think that cannot be said often enough, because oftentimes nowadays you'll hear meaning, which was something you couldn't even possibly talk about in a psychological context by the time Viktor was teaching in the 60s, 70s, 80s. People would say, well, what meaning? And that's a religious topic, or humanitas, but not hard fact science. We're psychologists here, and now that, of course, has changed completely. But oftentimes the definition, he would say that even the word meaning in English is not precisely describing what he was talking about. So then at some point he started using meaning and purpose, because I think purpose kind of opens it up to more of the bigger meanings in life. But he said, I have no perfect word for it. Meaning and purpose is the closest to what I'm trying to express, and I bring a lot of examples so that people can understand it. And there's a fun story, and I often tell that story, where somebody came up to him before a lecture, and he said, Dr. Frankl, I'm sorry, but I don't have time to listen to your lecture, so could you just tell me very quickly what's the meaning of life? And so he got a laugh out of that, but he would say, well, that's sort of like asking the best chess player at the world. At that time it was Kasparov. I think now it's ChatGTP probably. But if you would ask the best player, what's the best move in a chess game? And so probably Kasparov would have said, well, you can't just generally say that. You have to look at the specific individual situation of the game. You have to look at the individual players and their psychology and their strategies. And only if you put all these factors into the equation, you can say this or that is most likely the best move that you can make with the 99.9% chance. And then you make that move, and it might turn out to be a good move or not. That's life. But it's the important point is, it's not we who decide what is meaningful. It's not my feeling of, I feel this is meaningful, right? Therefore it is meaningful. Well, you can feel this move is meaningful, but that doesn't make it meaningful. And so the world doesn't care whether you feel what you're doing is meaningful or not. If you do feel, but good for you, but it's not necessarily based in reality or good for anybody else. So meaning is not a construct. It is not, well, according to Frankl, right? If you look at other writers who even existentialists, they will say a different thing. Yalom is a constructivist. His definition of meaning has nothing to do with Frankl. So Frankl's very clear. The best move is in the chess game. It exists objectively, and it's a process of finding out what is the best move, and then you go out and fulfill it. I would say when people say, "Oh, well, whatever feels meaningful," I say, "Well, Vincent van Gogh was a great painter, right? But he never sold a picture in his life. I think I read that somewhere. So he might have thought at the end of the life, well, my life was a waste. I didn't, maybe I should have done something else with it." And yet today, nobody would say that Van Gogh's life was meaningless. I mean, his work continues to inspire artists and people. And yet he didn't feel perhaps that there was a lot of meaning to it. So whatever you do in life, it can be highly meaningful and you might not even know it, or you might feel that it's very meaningful and it isn't. So if you think things to the end, right? So it's there to be discovered, not to be given, and not to be felt, and not to be put there by saying this is my meaning and therefore it's good. If that's your definition of meaning, you're miles off of what Viktor Frankl was talking about. Okay. Do you think that your grandmother Ellie is the big key to your grandfather being successful? Well, yes. When it depends on the definition of success. I mean, he was a great therapist, and he helped a lot of people just by doing therapy. So he didn't necessarily need my grandmother's assistance so much for that. He was that before they ever met. He might have written, I mean, I think had they not met, there would be a lot less Viktor Frankl books, and maybe not at all, because he was not in a good place after the war. So he always said there was a time when he was close to suicide. And personally, I don't think that he would have committed suicide in the end, because that would have gone against everything that he was writing about. But I think he would have been a very, very unhappy, sad, broken man without her. And I don't think he would have even lived to be 92 years old had he not met her. So yeah, I think she's a great part of why we're talking about him is because of her. Logotherapy is a territory of free people. That's how I see this. Study because it's close to my spirit. Don't you think that it's the hardest task to teach people to become free, to make that choice? Well, I think there are a lot of hard tasks when working with some people, and then it can be easy with others. I think the strength of logotherapy that it's often helping people remember something that they know in the depths of their heart to be true, and once they recognize this, then you don't need to do much convincing or pushing. But yes, of course, sometimes it's harder, and you need to do a lot of talking and kind of guide people along the way. That's different with every case and with every individual, and that's the challenge, but maybe also the beauty of it. But I like this. I recently actually got a letter from somebody who said, I finally understood that logotherapy is a liberating theory, and not one that's just full of laws and guidelines. And I think that's a good definition. How do you see the future of logotherapy? Well, I see the future of logotherapy right here. You all learning about it and coming together to teach and to learn. This is the future. It's in your hands.
Well, I see we're close to the end of our time, and I know Cindy needs to come back on towards the end. But one of the things that I would like to ask is there anything else that we haven't covered today that you would like to cover before Cindy takes over from us?
No, I think that was very good, and yeah, great questions, and I think yeah, it's so nice talking here. I think we could go on for hours, but that would not be meaningful, because there are other things and other people who have important things to say, and I just congratulate you all for being here and for doing this conference, and it's really great to see. And I think Viktor would have been very thrilled that he and especially logotherapy is not being forgotten, but on the contrary, that it's being passed on and discussed and refined, and that we're all here, and especially this way that we can be together, connected through technology, and using this technology in a meaningful way. So yeah, so thank you again for the invitation, and thank you for the this wonderful format of doing this interactively and openly.
And this has been delightful for us. We have enjoyed this. We like to thank the people that were involved in getting you involved. And so we thank you. And I don't actually know who set this up for Vicky and me to do this. It may have been Cindy, but anyway, whoever did, I would like for you to admit that to us, and we really appreciate it.
Yes.
It was a group effort. The committee was looking at it, and as I've shared, Bob, you and Vicky hold so much of the history and the stories you tell, and Alex, not that I'm good at your job at all, but you need to interview Bob and Vicky. They know many stories that the rest of us enjoy hearing and learning about you and your family and Dr. Frankl. And so, yeah, it was a group effort. And Alex, thank you. Thank you for participating. Our hope is hopefully in 2 years, we will have a on-site conference again. And if you can attend, definitely a cup of coffee or else join the pool party. I think you've attended a few of those. Those are where the stories really happen. And thank you again. And thank you for the work you do.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I think if Dr. Frankl was here, as he talks about family and creative and experiential and noetic and so on, I think you and your family have been a model of discovering and living a life with meaning. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And all of our best to your family.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All the best to you.
Thank you. Very quickly, for the participants, if you will remember to complete the survey, it's one of those things that we need for accreditation. So the survey for each of the sessions. Also remind you of the networking sessions that we have at lunch and at different times throughout the day. So if you'll check on those. And we have about 15 minutes between the next now and the next session. So please take care of yourself. Do what you need to do, and we'll see you at the next session then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.